Amber is a psychologist, a couples therapist, podcast host, and speaker. She is the founder of Ember Relationship Psychology, and she's inspired hundreds of thousands of people through her Instagram and her podcast, Relationship Psych. And I have to say, when I began this journey and getting into the couples space and learning from couples therapists, Amber was someone that I have listened to for a while and went to, and I've just loved all her content. So for the coupley community, definitely check her out, and you can find her at Ember Relationship Psychology on Instagram, and then her podcast is Relationship Psych. So I'm so excited to have her on the Coupley Show today, and we're going to be getting into some super cool stuff, which I think will be really relevant for you. Amber, welcome to the Coupley Relationship Advice Podcast.
Super stoked to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I would love for you to let the Coupley audience know a little bit more about your background and how you got into this space.
Yeah, so I got into this space. I'll give you the cold notes version, and you can pull apart any extra notes that you want. So I started off doing a psychology undergrad because my parents told me if I didn't go to school, they were going to take away my car. So I was like, psychology sounds cool, might as well do that. I had no clue what it was. Fast forward a few more years, I'm in the psychology undergrad. It's fine, but I had no interest in being a psychologist or anything. My sibling goes into long-term residential intensive outpatient addiction treatment. And one of the requirements if you lived in our family home was you had to be part of this addictions treatment. And my requirement as a sibling was about 12 hours a week. So it was pretty extensive commitment for someone who's in university and doing their own thing. So I was like, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm perfect, you're the problem, it's not me, I don't need to be part of this. So I set out on a mission to move out of my house, to not be part of this treatment center. Well, within the 3 months that it took from the date that I intended to move out to the date of actually moving out, I found I liked being in treatment. I too maybe had a problem. They call addiction a family disease because it impacts everyone in the family, and I learned that perhaps it had affected me. I learned that maybe I had some feelings about my family, and maybe I had a couple things to work on. And I liked seeing my brother recover and my family get closer, and I was really into that. So I decided not to move out and continue to be part of this treatment program. I finished my psych undergrad when I was part of this treatment program, and that was when I started to get an insight into how could psychology actually help people. I signed up to do a master's in marriage and family therapy, and I was really in it for the family therapy part. I wanted to learn about how to help families heal after going through addiction, basically what I went through. I started working with parents and siblings of severely addicted teens, and that was really meaningful to me. Now, even though I had thought I was perfect, and I thought that there was nothing wrong with me, when I got married the first time, well, that marriage quickly ended a short 10 months later in a divorce. And what I came to learn is a lot of the patterns I grew up with in my family, a lot of the emotional wounds that I had as a result of what happened in my family impacted how I showed up in relationships. And I picked people that replicated the same patterns I was used to that I didn't actually really want. So after I found myself out of that 10-month relationship, I was like, well, I didn't think that's how marriage was going to go for me. I thought this was going to be a one and done kind of situation. I was pretty devastated and upset. And so I went to the research. I had already gone to school for this, but it wasn't really where I focused. So I went back to the books that I read in school. I went back to some of the books that I purchased in school and did not read in school. And I started to read them. And as I dove into what makes a relationship succeed and how can I adjust and make some improvements to myself, I became more interested in this professionally. And just from there, I was always kind of seeing couples, but it wasn't my main area of focus. And the more I dove into it because it was relevant to my personal life, the more it became something that I really wanted to work on and help other people with because it became a passion for me as well. So that is the Coles Notes version of how I ended up in this field.
And I think I've listened to the longer version as well, and it involves taekwondo, being on a national taekwondo team,
Yes.
and there's some other elements to it as well. we can get the audience. Hey guys, like I said, check out Amber's stuff, and then you can listen to the longer version there as well. And Amber and I have we share quite a similar timeline in a way, in that I too didn't really ever see myself being part of the 43% of marriages that didn't make it, and also became really fascinated in the aftermath of why and what can be done to fix this. Why did you find that you were not looking into the literature when things were going off the rails? Because I didn't until afterwards, and I think it's just because maybe emotions were too high and I wasn't thinking analytically. But someone asked me that, they're like, "Oh, cool, you read a bunch of relationship books once you were divorced. Why didn't you do that before? Why didn't you do that when you knew that things weren't going right?" I wonder if you've got any insight on that.
Yeah, I didn't really read into anything either when I was actually in the marriage still. I don't think. I have no memory of doing that. Who knows, maybe I did, but I don't think that I did. I think for me, a piece of why I didn't is I was too resentful and too angry. I didn't care what the relationship book said. I wasn't in a place where I was willing to change that relationship. When I got out of the relationship, I was willing to then look at what can I do to change or be a better partner for the next relationship. Now, maybe if my partner had come and said, I'm willing to do this, this, and this, and make some changes, and showed that first, maybe then I would have been willing. But that wasn't the circumstance I was in, and the circumstance I was in is I wanted what I wanted. I had the requirements that I thought should be upheld, and I wasn't really willing at that time to do anything else. And to be honest, I don't even know if I really thought about it for whatever reason.
I think I was the same way. I think part of it for me was that I just didn't think that it would actually end until it was really. It had already kind of ended months before, and then the realization that had ended caught up with me, and I was like, oh, we've technically been separated for months now. We've just been living in the same space, and then occasionally having a good day and then having some really bad days, but not interacting as a couple. And so you're not, it's already kind of over. And I think as well, I just didn't know as much as I did now, and I was so sure that I was right on some stuff, and I was willing to die on these hills, which ironically you do end up dying on the hill. For me, in my case, that hill is something that you do end up dying on. But for those listening, the topic of this podcast is going to be around second marriages. We've already flawlessly moved in from it just from hearing Amber's story. But what do you think the difference is? And what are the differences that you see with your clients or from the research that you've read between those first and second marriages?
That's a great question. For me, and this isn't everybody's story, for me, the second marriage was an intentional marriage. And 25-year-old me, when I got married the first time, I thought I was intentional then too. So, maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. However, I had never really thought about what do I want now and long term. I thought about it loosely, but I'd never thought about, how do we spend our money together? How do we travel together? What is the budget we want for a house? What is disposable income? How do we talk about finances? What's the role with the in-laws? How do I want a relationship with my in-laws? Do we travel with the in-laws? There was, what's sex like? What frequency do I want sex? Have I considered what frequency they want sex? What is the role of drinking in our relationship? How does that impact things? Do we like to party in the same ways, or are we radically different? What's our different views on education and for how we make money? So although I had kind of thought about what do I want, I had never really thought about the details because I was never quite confronted with the details in the same way as I had to be once I was married. And then there was these details. I was like, oh crap, I don't love these details that I've never thought about. Yeah. So going into my second marriage, when I went into dating again, I was a lot more thoughtful about, how do people spend their money? Is it similar to how I spend my money? How do people value education? At the time I was studying for my licensing exam to become a psychologist, which took up a lot of my time. And a very common fight my ex-husband and I had was about my studying. And I can see why. Like, I wasn't paying attention to him. I was coming home and hitting the books. Like, I wasn't an attentive partner, and I wasn't willing to balance my time. But I never thought about, like, what would it be like to be with a partner who has experienced similar educational goals and achieved those, and so they'll have some sort of understanding about what I'm doing. That became important to me. So I just became intentional, and I began to think about my second marriage, but also relationships after the first marriages, kind of drawing on a whiteboard and writing on a whiteboard. And I chose a whiteboard because I wanted to be able to erase if what I thought I wanted wasn't actually it. I wanted to kind of reinvent that.
Or if they were coming over and you could quickly erase it.
Yeah, it was a mental whiteboard. But I would envision, like, okay, this is generally what I'm looking for. So I put out the qualities and the characteristics of a person that generally I thought I wanted. You know, generally, here's what was going on. I was open to revision. And the other pieces of the whiteboard were like, who do I want to show up as in this relationship? How do I want to behave? Like, what aspects of myself do I want to bring? What aspects of myself do I want to leave behind? And I started to map that all out. Now, what I learned in dating is you can meet the most awesome person that hits like every criteria that you put up there. And there's just not the connection. It's just not quite what you want. And I met some super lovely, amazing people that I'm delighted I had the opportunity to meet. And then you meet someone that hits like nothing or like very few on your whiteboard, and you've got sparks and chemistry. And that's not great either, because you know that spark, that chemistry, it's going to last you, you know, the research says 2 weeks to 2 years, depending on how things flow. And then it's going to go away and you're left with the real person. So I'd have to go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, like, how do I find someone that there's sparks and chemistry and also kind of hit enough of these criteria? And eventually I met someone that he hit a lot of the criteria, not all of them. And he brought things to the table I never even knew that I wanted. And there was sufficient, like pretty good chemistry. So I was lucky with that. But from the very beginning, when we started talking about if we wanted to be in a relationship, and bless my husband, he met me, and I was, you know, I'd been dating for, I don't know, maybe 9 months or so when I met him, so not that long after. And everyone I dated, it had been like you kind of saw each other for a while. So I'd seen people for a month or 2 months, and they hadn't been forward about, hey, should we be exclusive kind of thing. My husband was, though. It was our second date, and he was like, I want to do this. I want to be in a relationship with you. And so I was like, what? And I was stoked. Like, on the inside, I'm stoked because I was so into him. But also, I'm like, I just got divorced. Like, I'm currently separated. I'm not even divorced.
Yeah.
Like, people are, this is fast. What does a relationship even mean to you, right? So it was shocking to me, but it also allowed me to spark and ask him questions like, what does a relationship even mean to you? What are you asking me right now? What is the purpose of this? And he's, bless him, he was so good with my questions, and he answered them so well that I walked away from that conversation being like, well, I have nothing to lose here. Like, if we break up, who cares?
Yeah.
But it allowed us from the very beginning, and me being intentional, to have these great conversations that I never had with anybody else about, like, what are we trying to build? Like, what is the point of us giving a label? So this is my long-winded answer of saying intentionality was one of the real keys that helped set up my second marriage for success. When I think about a lot of my couples, and I've seen second marriages succeed and second marriages fail. A lot of my couples that I have seen, that I've worked with clinically, that have been quite set up for success, is they've mentioned a similar theme of being intentional. They knew what they wanted, they knew what they didn't want, and they selected a partner. They were thoughtful about the partner choice that could meet most of their needs. And they had conversations as a team and as a unit about, what does it mean to be a team? What does it mean to be a unit? Are we on the same page for those things? You know, discussing different issues and things they had learned before, and figured out if they were compatible enough before taking that next step. Now, I've seen couples that second marriages that have not done very well, but And maybe some of them were intentional at the start, but I've heard a lot of kind of falling into the relationship. All of a sudden that person was there, they were in it, they never quite made a decision to be in that relationship, they were just in it, and it kind of slid from there. So those are some of the things that I think about when I think setting up a second marriage to succeed, is being quite intentional and thoughtful about what you want.
From the hop as well. And I think that's something that can be a big advantage for dating someone and being with someone that has been married before, because they know what it's like for things not to work out. And I think you, like me, our parents were together growing up. My parents are still together now, so like I think on the year 40 of being married for them, which is amazing. And so I definitely, like you, never believed that it could be written on my path. And so dating again, you just come at it in such a different angle, because you are looking for like long lasting qualities, and it's almost like you want the qualities that are going to help you last the distance more than the qualities that might be fun in the moment. You're like, okay, that's fun now, but how am I going to feel like that? How am I going to feel about that in year 5? And do I want someone that really says yes to everything and goes to every party in year 6, like last minute? Like, is that going to be a quality that's interesting for me? No. And that really did change the type of person that I was seeking. And you just look at things in a very, very different way. And I'm really happy that you raised these second marriages that don't work, because there's that lack of intentionality. It comes at the beginning, but that can go through your entire relationship as well. So what are some of these more factors that we think can really lead to the second big relationship not working out?
So I think a lot of factors that for first relationship or second relationship that lead to them not working out, there's a lot of commonalities. So these are going to apply to both circumstances. One that you can kind of think about is, did you decide to be in this relationship, or do you feel like it just kind of happened to you? Mm-hmm. You just ended up in it. So they call that in the research, I think Gottman's research called it sliding versus deciding. What we know from the research, if you decided, it is more likely to work out than versus if you just kind of slid into it and you ask, well, how come you decide to move in together? Well, I don't know. It just kind of seemed like the right thing to do. Or our friends were moving in together, so we moved in together too. And you say, well, did you want to move in together? And they're like, well, it was just the next right step. You never get like a yes. I wanted to move in with them. I wanted to experience waking up with them, going to bed with them. So we hear this difference in sliding versus deciding. And that maybe you're not some people might be conscious of that, like with some foresight, but most people are more conscious of it with some hindsight. You're like, I didn't really make that choice. I just kind of did it. I ended up, I don't know, everyone else was getting married. And then the next thing I know, they were like, do you want to get married? And I said yes. And then we booked a venue. And it's like, did you want that? Well, they had lots of good qualities. Well, did you want to marry them? Well, they're not that bad. And you're like, okay. So you don't get a rosy picture from the beginning, kind of, when you're hearing about these relationships. Now, I mean, there's so many factors. I think about, are you able to be good friends? So we know also from the Gottman's research that 70% of long-term relationship satisfaction, romance, and passion has to do with having a great friendship. So are you friends? Like, is this someone that you want to spend time with? Do you want to ask them about their day, learn the ins and outs? Do you want to know who their friends are, their stresses, their strains, their sorrows, their excitements and their pleasures? And do you want to ask those questions every week? Because usually we're super good at asking questions and remembering the answers in early dating and early courtship. But with the passage of time and seeing that person every day, you're like, I don't know, I saw you like 5 minutes ago. Maybe you both work from home. You're like, I observed your behavior all day. So do you still want to ask them what's going on inside, even though you saw them? Are you willing to do the work to stay good friends? What we also know from the research is, are you willing to show each other that you like each other, you cherish each other, you respect each other through your words and through your actions? So, well, what we know from the research is the couples that do show each other they like each other, respect each other through their words and actions, they do better than the couples that don't. But a lot of people, when I start asking, well, like, how come you don't do these things, or what stops you from saying I love you, or what stops you from giving a compliment, or what stops you from giving your partner coffee in the morning, or what stops you from picking them up a gift because you know that's how they feel care. There's a few reasons I hear. One is, well, that's just not the way I've ever done it, so I don't want to do that. So a lot of people, like, this is just an example. Maybe words of affirmation is how one person receives love. So they need to hear, I love you, or you're handsome, or you're beautiful, or I think you're hot, or that looks great on you, or you're a great parent, or you work so hard. Maybe they need to hear that, but the other person maybe never experienced those kinds of words, has never had any experience with it, and so it's uncomfortable or weird to say that stuff, but they're not willing to try. They're just like, no, not willing to do that. And part of being in a relationship is learning new skills and is learning to make some sacrifices for the shared gain. So those things, both like asking questions, remembering the answers, making your partner feel cherished, cared about, loved, like those are two things that really are key ingredients to that friendship section. Now I can go on, but I want to give you a breath. Is there anything you want to pop in there with before I go on with my spiel continuing?
I'm absolutely loving this. Yeah, it's bringing up so many ideas. So yeah, please keep going.
Okay. Other things to be on the lookout for is when you start getting into conflict. So conflict is normal and a healthy part of relationships. It's going to happen, and even the best couples are going to have blowouts sometimes. Okay, it's going to happen. Now, there's a few predictable patterns in the relationship research that are more likely, well, if you do these patterns, you're more likely to be deteriorating your relationship, eroding your relationship, and they're predictors of divorce. So if you notice these patterns in your relationship, it's time to go, oof, that comes up. I do that a lot. Oops. And you have some power and control over how you communicate, because if you can stop these, you increase the chances your relationship's going to succeed. So the patterns we know from the research that are really destructive and lead to divorce are what the Gottmans call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I mean, bad name because they're really bad for your relationship, right? So we have criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So criticism. When I point out a character defect in my partner and their personality, or when I give them a negative attribution. For example, you're so lazy you didn't pick up your shoes from the door. When I use contempt, so this is insulting or injuring my partner with my words, or talking up to them from a place of superiority or putting them down. For example, I'm not your maid. You can walk your little legs over to the door and you can put your own shoes away because you're a grown adult.
Oof.
Yeah,
gonna get a reaction from that one.
Right? Yeah, people do. Third, we have defensiveness. So that's warding off an attack or playing innocent victim or counterattacking. So this could sound a few ways. What are you talking about? I didn't leave my shoes at the door. The kids must have left my shoes out. I certainly didn't do that. So making excuses. Or it could sound like a counterattack. Why do you care that I leave my shoes at the door? You leave your stuff scattered all over this house and you're going to nitpick about my stuff at the door? Or you could stonewall. So you're conveying your displeasure, disapproval through emotionally or physically disengaging. So you could be staring blankly at your partner as they talk to you, or you could just get up and walk away. So what we see is these 4 behaviors erode the relationship. And you don't have to be perfect people all the time, but you got to make sure these aren't the dominant patterns that are showing up in how you communicate with each other, because these things have the power to break down relationship between you. And there's a number of other things that go into managing conflict, and I could talk for an hour about managing conflict. But I think it's really important for couples to figure out, how do they want to communicate to each other, and how are they going to manage not showing up in destructive ways.
And the Gottmans talk a lot about sort of ratios. So you get a little bit of a leeway. Like no one is going to be perfect 100% of the time. But it's almost like if you're showing up for your partner in a good way a lot of the time, then that time when you make a mistake, or you don't say things perfectly, you're upset and things just come out. I think what I've definitely noticed in the length of time in my relationship, our conflict has reduced so much because we're both really try hard a lot of the time. And so that when one of us does something that is one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, it's more like, well, that was like an exception. And we're finding that we can forgive the other person really fast because it's out of character. And if anything, it sparks like concern in the other person. But you see some couples where they're like, this is their mode of communication. And they're like battle hardened. And like the stuff they say to each other, you're like, wow, this is wild. I would never say this to my partner. And they're just sort of like walking behind their shield and letting it go.
Totally. So you're so right with the Gottmans and the ratio. So they have a few different ratios. So they have a ratio of 20 positive interactions for every one negative interaction in daily interactions to get a net neutral. And in conflict, it's a ratio of 5 positives to 1 negative to have that generally go well. So I like to think of my relationship and relationships as a bank account, right? The thing is, you got to put in a lot of deposits for every withdrawal. Like that's a 20 to 1. And these deposits, they're not huge things. They're not like dinner and a movie and romantic lighting and mood music and sex. And like, it's not, no. It can be like a smile, a touch on the arm. Hey, you look great. Thank you so much for taking out the garbage. I missed you today. Wow, you're so special to me. It could be grabbing them their favorite cupcake on your way home or getting them a bagel or something if they like bagels. Like, who knows what it is, right? It's just these little things. It could be looking at them when they talk to you and putting down your phone.
I was going to say that. The key, holding space. It's my new favorite term as I've got into this. That idea of just like holding space, giving someone your attention and exploring an issue with them.
Yes. So, yeah, totally. And so these are the ways you put in deposits. So if my relationship has this huge balance of money in it, and then my partner comes along and they, maybe they accidentally snip at me and they criticize, okay, it's a withdrawal. But you got so much money in your account that you're like, that was annoying, but it's fine. I don't need to be defensive back. I don't need to counter back. I might be momentarily annoyed, but you can move past it and maybe see the feeling or what the need. You can try to figure out what they were trying to communicate to you beneath whatever they just said when you have that relationship bank account is really full. Now, if your bank account is low on funds or it's an overdraft, it takes almost nothing to set a cascade of negative interactions in motion because you can't give them the generous assumption. You can't give them the benefit of the doubt. And I love what you just said about holding space. So another relationship predictor of succeeding or failing is what the Gottmans call bids for connection. And then do we turn towards, turn away, or turn against those? So if I make a bid for connection and I'm like, my partner and I wear headphones in the house because I am very sensitive to noise. So he wears his headphones all the time, which then I'm like, you're not listening to me, but it's because I ask him to wear headphones. So it's my own problem. Anyway, he's got his headphones on. If I make a bid for connection and I say, hey babe, can I have your attention for a sec? And he takes his headphones off and he looks at me and he goes, yeah, what's up? He has noticed and positively turned towards my bid for connection. Now, he could do 2 other things, turn away or turn against. So in this case, it might be that he ignores me and he sees I'm there and he just doesn't it doesn't register. He's not mean, he's not malicious, he just doesn't engage. Or maybe he turns against. And he's like, Amber, here we go again. Can't you see that I'm just trying to do my thing? So what we know from the research is how you respond to your partner's bid for connection is really important. I'm pretty sure it's after 5 years. Yeah, the couples that made it after 5 years were turning towards each other's bids for connection in a positive way, turning towards about 86% of the time. Whereas couples after 5 years that were headed for divorce were only turning towards each other's bids for connection 33% of the time. So you got to be willing to hold space, or at least tell your partner when you're going to be willing to hold space and turn towards them a huge percentage of the time for that relationship to generally go well, or else it's headed the other way.
I think the most shocking ratio for me was that in conflict, it's 5 to 1. 5 to 1 positive to negative ratio in conflict. Because you sort of think conflict is when you're trying to win an argument, but this isn't actually the case. If you're going to have a successful relationship, it's not. You're not trying to win. You're still trying to keep your connection. And what are some of like the positive things that you can do in an argument? Because I'm sure couples listening to this are like, wait a second, when we're arguing, we're arguing. Like
Yeah.
we're in. How do I wind that back and put in positive things in a conflict?
Yeah, totally. So this could be like if I'm raising a complaint. So I could give them credit for a time they've done it right. So I might say something like, the other day I saw you did this and you were really trying. But then when this happened, I was upset about blank. So you could, you maybe heard in like business, like the sandwich technique, lead with a good and then say the negative. So you could do something like that. If you were the receiver, the listener of the information, there's a number of things you can do that are helpful. So, for example, you can ask good, open-ended questions. So what people often, the tendency when you're fighting is your partner says something, you disagree or you don't like it, and so you counter right away and you try to persuade them to see your view. But instead, if you just ask an open-ended question like, what are your needs here? Or tell me what you feel about that. Or what are the choices as you see them? Or how did this all come to be? Like, you ask an open-ended question that allows them to open up. That's a positive. You're showing interest, you're showing engagement, you're allowing them to open up and acting like you care to understand. So that's a positive. Other things you can do to show positives are like accepting influence. So recognizing you have two different equally valid points. Points of view. And you can do that through like using validation, saying things like good point, or okay, I see where you're coming from, or I understand why you felt that way given what you're talking about now. Look, validation doesn't mean you agree. It doesn't even mean you like their point of view. It just means that for half a second you can put yourself in kind of their shoes and be like, yeah, okay, sure. I see where you're coming from. I get it. Another thing you can do is summarize back a little bit of what you've heard them say. So I don't mean like you have to be like this robotic, stilted person that verbatim gets every word right. But if they're upset because they're like, I was so upset with the way you talked to me in front of our friends on Saturday. Oh, yeah. And you said, I get it. It makes sense you were upset because of the way I talked to you in front of our friends. In that, you've validated and you've kind of summarized back and you've let them know, hey, I hear you. This is like literally what I've heard you say. It's a powerful way to be there for your partner when they're expressing an upset. So these things I'm saying are easier to do at the start of an argument when an argument hasn't put you in a fight, flight, freeze zone. So what can happen very quickly in conflict with our partner, for a lot of couples, especially if there's been a lot of fighting or you're in a quite negative place, is our poor little nervous systems do a thing called emotional flooding. And it's when our nervous system gets physiologically overwhelmed in our body and your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain goes offline and you're in fight, flight, or freeze. Now these skills, softening how I complain or raise something, how I listen, asking an open-ended question, using some validation, maybe summarizing somewhat back. Well, if I'm in fight, flight, or freeze, I can't do that. Like, that's not going to happen. I'm just reacting, right? I'm either walking away, I'm shouting something nasty back at you. So you have to be able to notice what on earth is happening in your body and be able to regulate that sufficiently enough to be engaged in the conversation. Now, the research tells us humans are actually not very good at knowing if we're regulated or not. Or like, heck, I know better. Catch me on a bad day. Someone's like, are you flooded? I'd be like, no, I'm fine. Because you think you're fine when you're not fine, when you're, in an argument state. So
is it a good idea to tell your partner then to calm down if they're being flooded?
It's the best idea because, hey, when we're in fight, flight, or freeze, right? So it's like, calm down. You're like, I'm fine. I am calm. It's the way. It's the way. No. So obviously we're being facetious here. No, like it's probably not going to help your partner calm down if you think they need to calm down, if you tell them to calm down. I have worked with couples where it has helped.
Is this where you, as the therapist, are telling them to calm down? Or when their partner is telling the other person to calm down?
No, when they do it together, they have an agreement about it. So I have seen couples have successful agreements about it, but it's not done like you need to calm down. It's done like very gently, and they've agreed on this as a tool. I've seen people do that, and I've seen it be successful. But if you haven't agreed on it, and you're not calm and someone tells you to calm down, come on. Most of us are doing the opposite here. We're
Oh, yeah.
escalating. We are calm.
How do you get, and once you're in that activated state, so what next? And I am definitely in arguments, I go into fight. I am like, get just so mega logical, and I'm like, that's it. I'm digging in, and I'm going to win or die. And I've done, I like to think that I've definitely moved away from that. That was like my old model, and my new model is now is like curious, be curious, just like think, what is their perspective? What is it they want? Like, let's think and talk. Like, that's my new thing is just, and by being curious, I don't get angry because the conflict is dissolved. But what do you do when you get, when you get angry and you're in and you're flooded? So you're now in fight. So you're going for it, and you are shouting. You're active. You're in flight, which means you can just sometimes, these people sometimes like crumble, right? These are the guys where if you have a conflict with someone, they're like, okay, yeah, I'm wrong. Whatever you say is right. Or it's like passive aggressive. Like, okay, well, obviously everything I do is wrong. And then that doesn't really solve an argument. And then shut down is like stonewalling behavior, right?
Yeah. So the first thing is to become aware that this is probably happening to you. So you can check that a few ways. Like maybe you've just identified with this and you're like, oh yes, that's me.
Yeah.
Oops. So cool, you have some awareness. If you wear a smartwatch, which a lot of us do, just check your heart rate. If your heart rate's over 100 beats per minute when you're just sitting at rest talking to your partner, you're probably in fight, flight, or freeze. Probably.
Right.
But what you do once you start to be aware of this is you need to take a break and self-soothe. So I am a personal hater of a break. I hate breaks. I wish that it was like, don't ever go to bed. This is a myth. Don't ever go to bed angry. I wish that was true. It's not true. Sometimes you should go to bed angry. But I hate that personally on a personal level because I want to talk things out and have it solved and have my feelings be fixed. And mostly I want my partner to fix it because in my view, he was wrong, right?
I'm with you, Amber. I'm team let's talk it out as well. I will never get bored. Let's talk it all the way out till the very, very end.
Yeah, so like I hate my advice right now and I wish it wasn't what I'm saying because it is personally not what I like. But I know, so this is where I had to go to the research as a person. And as a person, be like, this is dumb research, whatever. I don't want to take a break. Breaks suck. My needs aren't met. I'm so upset. I can't calm down. And learn the skills to soothe myself in distress so I could go back and have a productive conversation with my partner so we could reconnect again. And there was responsibility on me to walk my little feet into a different room and do something productive to calm myself down. And I hated that. And I still hate it. And when my partner wants to take a break because he needs a break, I'm so mad because I hate it. So I have this duality. It's like there's two Ambers. There's this like logical therapist Amber that knows this is really good for us. He is protecting the relationship. This is so healthy. And then there's this little gremlin part of me that's a child that's having a temper tantrum being like, why isn't he talking to me? He doesn't care about me. If he cared, he would be sitting here talking this out or something like that.
That's very similar to my narrative. What is it that you do to, what is your self-soothe thing? And is this more on like the people that have more of like an anxious attachment style that tend to have the way that you and I think about this?
Probably, yeah. Because more people who have more of an avoidant attachment style tend to prefer to take the break and take the break. But, you know, it can happen to different people. But yeah, probably more of that anxious attachment. And, sorry, what was your question?
How do you self-soothe?
How do you self-soothe? Okay, so what you have to do is you have to get away from thinking the distress-maintaining thoughts. Okay, so the distress-maintaining thought is you continue to think about, in your head, the thing that is making you so angry. And when you're mad, it feels good to think about the distress-maintaining thought. So, you walk yourself away. And if you have the wherewithal, like you and your partner agree ahead of time how these self-soothing breaks are going to look and you know how long they're going to be, when you're going to come back, it is really hard in the middle of a fight to be like, I need a break, I'm coming back in 20 minutes. Now, if you can say that, perfect. Say it. If you can, even just indicate you're leaving and you're coming back because it can feel like abandonment to your partner. And if you just leave and you guys don't have an agreement in place about taking time to self-soothe. And if you haven't said you're coming back, then it's just stonewalling because your partner doesn't know you're going to self-soothe.
And it's punishing. Yeah.
So have a conversation about this, or at least, at the very least, tell them, I'm going to be back. So self-soothing, you have to step away, or you could do it together if you both agree to do it together. Like you could sit down and watch a TV show together in silence where you stop talking about whatever the thing is, but you have to do something that is going to distract your thoughts, that doesn't keep them on it. So that could be just scrolling on Instagram. That could be watching a TV show. It could be reading a magazine or a book. It could be having a hot shower, a cold shower. It could be doing an exercise. It could be hopping on like a Headspace or a Calm app and doing a meditation. It's whatever you're going to do that's going to get your mind off of whatever you were thinking about, distract you a little bit, and allow you to calm your nervous system down. So if you were with me in therapy, I'd probably do some deep breathing with you, some tensing and relaxing of your muscles, things like that. But prior Amber, even probably current Amber, like I'm a therapist in session, I do breathing with my clients as the number one thing I do with them because it regulates your nervous system pretty fast. But if I'm actually upset, I am not breathing. I'm not going to do it. I would rather scroll on Instagram and lose myself down some scroll hole, reply to some posts, reply to some people, get out of myself by engaging with others. That's more likely what I'm actually willing to do when I'm mad. So I don't care. Like a lot of people are like, it has to be meditation or breathing. Like, yes, those things are fantastic and they're super, super effective. And if they work for you and you're willing to do them, do them. If you are not willing to do them, do anything else, basically, that's going to get you out of thinking the distress-maintaining thoughts.
I've rebranded our breaks when we have a larger argument because my girlfriend is way more avoidant, and we've got the deal where we're not doing stonewalling, so we're having like a, hey, I'm upset, I don't want to talk to you right now. We're taking some time not to talk. And I've rebranded that time, whereas before I'd like really push for it, but now I've rebranded it as a date myself day. So I am doing, like, I'm going to take myself on a date myself day. I'm going to go to the gym, the swimming pool. I'm going to go to the cinema. I'm going to go to the bookstore, buy some books. I'm going to go to Winners, to Marshalls, TK Maxx for those in America, or TJ Maxx. And that is it. I am looking after myself today, and I'm going to get some like delicious junk food as well. That is it. This is like our longer, when we get into a longer fight, that is it. It's rebranded Date Yourself Day, and it's been
I like that.
great.
Nice.
So I come back in a fantastic mood, and my partner is like, oh, you've been, like, the energy's just different. The energy's changed. I'm like, yep, it's cool. We can talk through things.
Yeah, I love that. It's great.
Date Yourself Day. There we go, making it a thing. I guess one of the things that I was looking into before this podcast is that the statistics aren't on our side. And I'm saying I'm not married yet, but I'm in a long-term second relationship. And so the divorce rate for first-time marriages are 43%. The divorce rate for second marriages is 65. Like, what is... Do you think doing all of this will load the dice for us and truly give us and the people listening that happy ever after? Are there any other things or practices that we can pull into relationships that will help things last long term?
So there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees. If we do any of the things and all things right, there's no guarantees it's going to work. But I certainly think you can stack the deck in your favor if you make some changes and are willing to learn at least some fundamentals about relationship, but what's going to set you up to succeed, what's going to set you up to fail, so you can have that good, solid relationship that withstands the test of time. I mean, no one wants to be miserable just in a relationship. Like that also sucks, right? Like you want the friendship, you want this closeness, you want someone you generally get along with, you enjoy their company. So there are totally things you can do to change how you do relationship. And you don't have to be doomed to them. A pattern I see for a lot of the people who are headed for divorce 2, divorce 3, divorce 4, whatever, is they haven't made adjustments. They come in for an initial assessment and they're doing all the 4 horsemen and they're doing all these different conflict things that aren't helpful and they're not willing to change. So it's time to learn some new skills.
It's this growth mindset at such a key part of relationship success and success in life, but the ability to be okay with change. But why do people get so stuck? Like, what are the reasons that people can't, or they say they can't? Is it just they're saying I'm not being true to myself, or is their personality tied to certain things?
So one of the most common things people say is, I've never done that before. That's not the way I am. Like it's hands down one of the most common things people say. And you're right. It isn't the way you are. You're right. It isn't something you've done before. And how do you like the results you're getting? And so a lot of the skills and a lot of the fundamentals I teach people and that I've had to go through myself, they're not like they're basic, simple things that are hard to do in practice. Like instead of criticizing my partner, it's hard to raise an issue in a gentle way, tell him how I feel about what and ask him for what I need. For example, instead of saying, when you stayed out, or I could say, you stayed out till 4:30 with your brothers the other night, you know what? That means you don't care about me, you don't respect the agreements we've had. Okay? So criticizing him, and that's probably not going to go very well. Instead, I could say, I was worried and feeling alone, and I woke up and I was feeling like frantic in the bed when you weren't home at 4:30. What I need is, if you're going to have late nights, for us to agree on that ahead of time so I know where you are, and for like you to call. And you're going to respond in such different ways. Now, to make that adjustment, the concept of how to make the adjustment is simple. The willingness to do it when you're upset is hard. It's not the way I was. I did not used to speak very nice. I was not very nice, I would say, to many people. But I was willing to have better relationships. That's what I wanted. So, okay, if I'm willing to make some changes, like, can I improve my relationships? Yes. And a lot of us, people say, well, that's what my parents did. Like, that's just what I learned. You're right. It is what you learned. You're right. It is what your parents did. Is that the relationship you want? If it is, cool. Keep going. Like, sure. But if you want change, you have to make a change.
And I think as well, it's about, do you want to do things at a low level or do you want to do things at a high level? Like, you've got a background in martial arts. When you're doing martial arts, it's like, okay, take anyone off the street and have them fight someone that's trained. Who do you think is going to win? Guess what? The martial artist is going to win almost 100% of the time. Even put a size difference in there. Guess who's going to win? The martial artist is going to win. Why? Because they've had coaching and training from instructors, and they've also drilled martial arts in good times and in bad times. Think about combat. It's the time when you are most likely to lose sparring is if you get angry, because when you get angry, you make mistakes. And in some ways, it's exactly the same thing applies. It's like, do you want a high quality, a high value relationship, or do you just want to be an untrained buffoon, like throwing clumsy blows around in the ring?
Yeah. I think that's hard for a lot of people. Another reason they often say is like, I lose motivation to change. I'm like, I get that. Putting in effort sucks. It is hard. And we are who we show up as most of the time, right? So if you go through like 1 week of making a change and then the next week you don't, it's not like it's a one and done thing. You do have to consistently make the effort. And I totally understand losing motivation. So how do you build that in? Do you put reminders in your phone? And people laugh at me when I suggest this. But literally, for so many of the behavioral changes I have made in my life, I put reminders in my phone. I schedule them into my calendar. I make them my passwords. So I know what is the behavior I'm working on changing, because I'm not motivated either. I get it. Like, it sucks to have to stay motivated to make some of these changes. And so I just want to validate you. If you're like, how do I stay motivated? Motivation sucks. It waxes and wanes. I know. I hear you. And then how do you figure out what is the thing you want? Like, for me, I love my husband. I knew very early on that this is someone I wanted to be with, and he told me point blank if I continued, he was going to end our relationship if I continued the way I was
Wow.
being. And that was helpful in that I recognized if whether or not I was motivated, whether or not this was the way I've always done things, I had to make some adjustments if I wanted to be with him. And at the time I wasn't very delighted about what he said, but now I'm so grateful because we have this great relationship. But literally, I had to schedule these things in my calendar. I had to, like I said,
Right.
make them my passwords. I had to make it a daily practice to show up differently. Now, we were just talking the other night. It's been over 4 years since we've had like a big blowout fight. Like, we disagree and we have fights, and I'll cry, and he does whatever he does. It's been over 4 years since we've had a fight that is quite regrettable to us. And those used to happen fairly regularly, too regular enough that he was willing to end our relationship. And at this point, I made some adjustments, and so was he. But to me now, they're just so natural. Like, when I think of the way I used to treat him, I honestly feel so guilty and so bad. I just want to go back and tell him, like, I wish I never said those things to you. Like, I wish I never treated you that way. Like, I can't even fathom that I thought that was okay now when I look at how I treat him. And it's been so worth it to make those adjustments because we have this beautiful, happy relationship. And just even thinking about the way I used to treat him, like, I get emotional because I'm like, wow, how did I think that was okay? But because I was used to it, it's what I always did. That's just how I showed up. So I just encourage you, if you're like, this is the way I am, or it will take motivation, it's going to be hard. True. I hear you. And on the other side of those changes is the relationship you've always wanted.
I
Or you're
love
going to get
that.
the data that you make the changes, and the person that you're making the changes for doesn't want to make the changes with you, and then you have some decisions to make. But there's the potential for the relationship that you always wanted to be on the other side of those changes.
What a beautiful sentence. I mean, and this is exactly why we built that Coupley app to send you those daily reminders and notifications. So for all of those that switch their notifications off, go into settings, put them back on. You get those daily questions, those couples quizzes, the games, the articles. Get those back on going in the app because it is about doing small things often that lead to these behavioral shifts. Amber, what a pleasure it's been talking to you. Thank you so much. I'd love to hear a few things. One, let's go over again where people can reach you. You offer couples therapy in Ontario, though I believe you're fairly frequently booked up, but I'd love to hear more about where people can reach you. Two, what are your plans for the rest of the year?
Well, you can reach me okay, so this is a confusing thing. My name is Amber with an A.
But, with an A,
My
but.
Yes. My practice is Ember Relationship Psychology with an E. Okay?
Like burning embers.
Yes. Yes. You nailed that. Okay, so Google or whatever, Ember Relationship Psychology, or www.emberrelationshipsychology.com or .ca.
It's in the show notes as well.
Yeah, Instagram at Ember Relationship Psychology. So that's where you can find me. Couples therapy in Ontario. So you are right. I'm often booked up, and this also ties into what I'm doing for the rest of the year. So I am 28 weeks pregnant at the time of this recording. So I'm going to birth a child here shortly. So
Congratulations.
hopefully birth a child here shortly in a few months. So that means for the rest of this year I am full, but in April I'm going to be revamping up at work. So if you're interested in what I'm doing, kind of like February, March, I'm going to be opening up consultation calls to take on clients starting in April again. So I do couples therapy, but only in the province of Ontario. So you must be in the province of Ontario at the time of service delivery to work with me.
In Canada.
So that is, Canada. So that's how you can work with me, and check it out on my website. There's links there. But yeah, the rest of my year. So I'm like right now getting ready to just enjoy the rest of my summer. I'm going to have a little bit of fun. I've got a friend, one of my best friends in the world is coming to stay with me this weekend, and I'm so excited. Got some time with my family, going home, and then it's like full nesting mode, get the nursery ready and all that jazz, and then figure out what being married with a baby is like, and figuring out what it's like to have a baby. So that is what I'm up to for the rest of the year.
Can't wait, Amber. I hope we can do another check-in with you next year, all around the topic of being married with a baby and how that has been.
Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
sure it'll be super interesting.
Yeah. Awesome. Amber, thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate having you on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.